Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also to click on the bell notification. That way, when we're doing our thing, YouTube lets you know. Today, we continue my top 100 board games of all time. In particular, we'll be covering numbers 60 through 51 in today's video. Let's get straight to it. My number 60 board game of all time was on last year's list. It was actually ranked as high as number 34, so it has taken a bit of a dip, but not too much considering all the new games I've played in the last year. My number 60 is Hollywood Golden Age, designed by Reiner Knizia, and this edition here is published by Ludonova Games. This is a classic auction bidding game designed by Reiner Knizia originally back in 2000. It's had several iterations, several reprints with different names through different publishers. It's gone by Hollywood Golden Age. No, well, this one's Hollywood Golden Age. It's gone by Hollywood Blockbuster, Trump Fabric, Dream Factory, and a few other titles out there. This game is a really cool game where players play the role of producers, navigating the scene in Hollywood, trying to recruit the best directors, the best actors, the best guest actors, cameo actors, cameramen, seamstresses, all the different works that you need in order to complete a movie, film, script, right? And basically, it's very abstracted as far as that's concerned. What's really happening is you're moving along the board to different sections where different tiles are available, and the players are bidding for those tiles. But the cool thing about this game is that it has a fixed, closed economy. Each player starts with like 12 money to start the game, and that is all the money that will remain in the game throughout. There is no bank, so to speak, that you will continue to add to the economy from. No, it's that much money. And every time you win a bid, the money does not just go to a discard pile or to the bank again. Instead, it's distributed among all the losers of the same auction, right? It's distributed as evenly as possible. So that really makes it very interesting because now all of a sudden, there's a huge consolation prize to losing an auction. And not only that, but you are certain that your day in the sun will come, because if you lose enough auctions, you're going to have more cash than everybody else around, and you will be guaranteed that eventually you're going to win an auction or two of your own. So it's really cool, you know, doing the math in your head, the number crunching and trying to figure out, you know, how much money is out in the economy. You subtract your total, you have an idea, but you may not know necessarily who has how much money, right? Players are collecting awards for having the best movies in all the different genres, for having the best movie period from round to round. And even there's an award at the end of the game for whoever has the worst movie. So you could even strategize and try to work towards having the worst film out there. Really cool, neat game. My number 60 board game of all time, Hollywood Golden Age. And now we move on to my number 59, and this game was also on my list last year, and it was ranked number 37, more or less around where Hollywood Golden Age is. This year it's number 59, and that's Lord of the Rings, designed by Reiner Knizia, published by Fantasy Flight Games. This is the original co-op game in the modern board game hobby. This game has just recently had a new pretty up 20th anniversary edition from Fantasy Flight Games. This is a little bit of an older edition, the one that I have here. But this is a really cool, again, the originator, the pioneer to the cooperative genre in the board game hobby. And another Reiner Knizia game. This game, basically, players are taking the roles of one of 5 different hobbits. And the 4 main hobbits from the films, and then another hobbit, or should I say from the books, because this actually predates the films. Back in the year 2000, it first came out. And basically, players are going through 4 different major chapters of the saga. And they're all represented by these boards, these double-sided adventure boards that the players are going to be traveling through. And basically, you're trying to go all the way through these spots, and you're playing different cards that allow you to move up these different paths. And each of these paths have different benefits that they give you, different resources that are beneficial, certain tokens that are actually essential to prevent corruption going forward. And also they give you money that you could use to call upon Gandalf. Well, not money, they call it runes that you could use to call upon Gandalf and his help. but it's always the central track on the board that's the most essential. So it's the one that's crucial to the completion of this adventure. So while you do want to do a few other things on the periphery, you do not want to do it at the expense of failing to advance the center track. You also have these events here that are triggered, and they're all based on situations that actually happen in the actual story, right? So this is where a lot of the thematic flavor comes from. It comes from the events that get triggered. And for the most part, these events are very detrimental to the group of players. But it's really cool because you're trying to go through all these adventures, ultimately ending up in the last adventure, which is Mount Doom, and trying to get here to destroy the One Ring. And all the meantime, you're trying to manage your corruption because there is a corruption track. And the players, the group of players, are starting over here, but as the game progresses, they're advancing in corruption. And the Sauron AI player, so to speak, is advancing over here. And if Sauron ever intersects with one of the good guys, one of the hobbits, that hobbit is killed and eliminated from the game. As long as that hobbit was not the ring bearer, the game goes on. So you're really trying to manage it. You're also trying to decipher who is the best person to be the ring bearer currently based on the circumstances. Frodo always starts the game as the ring bearer, but he doesn't necessarily always end the game. Really cool, really neat, nice little puzzle that you're dealing with in order to try to figure this game out. It is pretty darn tough, but always a fun experience, especially if you like the Lord of the Rings saga. My number 59 board game of all time, Lord of the Rings. And now we move on to my number 58. And my number 58 is new to me this year. And it is Tower of Babel, designed by Reiner Knizia and published by Rio Grande Games. Yes, folks, this is the third Knizia game in a row. So for all of you Reiner Knizia haters, tune out and go to another channel. You might want to unsubscribe to me altogether after this, right? I love Reiner Knizia, great designer, prolific designer, has been doing it for so many years. This game here is actually from the year 2005. This game is on my top 10 underrated board games of all time because this is a pretty good game. This is an area majority game where players are working to build the 7 wonders of the world and the 8th wonder introduced in this game as the unfinished Tower of Babel. And it's almost like a semi-co-op because players can help other players on their turn contribute towards the building of these 8 wonders. Now, this is one of the reasons why this game is not successful at all. As you can see, this board is so bland. The color schemes, the graphic design, none of this jumps out at you, even by 2005 standards. But the gameplay is very satisfying. Again, there's a little bit of a semi-co-op where players are trading cards or offering cards to trade on another player's turn in order to help them. And the active player is deciding which player's help he or she will accept. But even the other players who they turn down, they will get a consolation prize and they will score some points even for the offer they just made. It might just be 1 or 2 points, but hey, it contributes towards the overall goal of winning the game. But what happens is, once you've successfully built a portion of one of these wonders, you put some of your little building pieces onto that section, and you start an area majority competition there, where those different buildings represent your presence there. And at the end of certain scoring rounds, and the scoring rounds are triggered by the completion of one of those wonders, you're going to score points for that. But what's interesting about the points and the scoring rounds is that there is a increasing amount of value to whoever's the first and the second. There's always a consolation prize of 3 points for whoever has a presence in any wonder once it's completed. But the first, the primary and secondary, the majority and the secondary in each of those areas are going to score even more points. And for every successive scoring round that's triggered, it's going to add on to how much those locations are worth. So managing all that, you're also trying to get a set collection of these different materials, these tokens that represent the different materials that you're using to build the wonders. And you score a certain amount of points for how many you can have of those. If you have 2, you score a few points. If you have 3, you score even more. And if you have 4 of those tokens of those materials, then you score 20. So there's nice set collection. There's nice area majority. There's some nice and neat trading going on. And again, that neat mechanism of not all scoring rounds are created equal. Really cool. My number 58 board game of all time, Tower of Babel. Number 57 board game of all time was actually on last year's list. It was ranked number 26. So it has gone down a bit, but I still love this game, and that is Ticket to Ride, designed by Alan Moon and published by Days of Wonder Games. This is a game that I own tons of content for. I believe I own every imprint expansion out there. So this game, I've had lots of fun with it over the years. Have fun playing it with my friends, have fun playing it with my family. Look forward to introducing this game to my son in a few years as he gets bigger. This is a route building game where players are, drafting cards and almost like Rummy, and playing sets of the same colors in order to build the routes on the board. And there's routes of different sizes. But ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to be efficient and build bigger routes because they'll score you more points. But you're also trying to accomplish your secret missions or your destination tickets that you draw at the beginning of the game, because they're going to get you lots of points if you successfully complete them, and they'll also lose you lots of points if you fail to complete them. You love geography. If you like traveling, this is a game you might want to try. There's expansions from all the different continents in the world, except for South America, I believe. And you have tons of different countries and even cities that are being represented through this brand. My number 57 board game of all time, Ticket to Ride. And now we move on to my number 56. And my number 56 also was on last year's list and also has climbed down just a bit. This was ranked number 39 last year, and that is Tikal, designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling, published by Rio Grande Games, at least this edition. I believe Super Meeple did the newer edition, which is a very pretty edition with three-dimensional pieces and all of that. But this game is a classic. It's a Spiel des Jahres winner from 1999. It was the introduction to Kiesling and Kramer's mechanism of the action point allowance, where players have a certain amount of action points that they can use, and they have a pool of actions that they could choose from, and not all the actions cost the same amount of action points. So you're kind of budgeting this all throughout your turn, from turn to turn. So players basically have 10 action points and about 6 different actions they could choose from, all again costing a different amount of actions. And basically what you're doing is you're a group of explorers and you're excavating and exploring Tikal to find these different temples, to find these different treasures. You're collecting treasures with a set collection in mind, because the more you collect of the same type of treasure, the more points you will score, the artifacts. And with the temples, you're trying to excavate them in order to build them to their highest levels, right? And the higher these temples are, the higher their values, the more valuable they will be during the scoring rounds that get triggered whenever you reveal a volcano tile. There's some tile placement going on where you reveal different tiles as you cut through the forest and explore this land. It's really cool because there's a nice area majority going on. I always appreciate area majority games. Had an area majority game earlier on this very list. And basically, you're trying to have the area majority in the different temples in order to score them during the scoring rounds. But you could also, at least twice in the game, put one of your explorers on top of the temple as a guard. And basically that assures you that that temple is yours, no matter who has the majority in that area. But again, you could only do that twice. Really cool, really neat, manipulating these and budgeting these action points to the best of your abilities and to the most optimal result. That is the challenge of this game. But again, just a fun, meaningful experience every time I get this to the table. My number 56 board game of all time, Tikal. And now we move on to my number 55. And my number 55 is new to the list this year, and that is a Game of Thrones, the living card game, designed by Eric Lang and Nate French, and published by Fantasy Flight Games. First of all, I've had a good experience with some Eric Lang games in the past. I've had some good experience with some Nate French games, in particular their living card games like Star Wars, the card game, Lord of the Rings, the card game, and here they combine for this Game of Thrones, the card game. I actually was just recently exposed to the intellectual property. I mean, I knew of the intellectual property, but I just recently started following and watching some of the series just to get familiar with it, in order to immerse myself and enjoy the gameplay experience as well. And it's been really cool. I like the fact that this is the type of tactical card game that's usually reserved for 2 to 4 players. However, this game in particular goes from 2 to 4, and it makes sense because at the end of the day, there's so many different houses involved in this struggle for Westeros in the story, right? So it only makes sense that this game could accommodate more players, right? I haven't played it at 4 players, but I imagine that at 3 or 4 players, it plays just fine. It's really cool because players are going back and forth, and they have certain money that they could use in order to deploy their characters, but the money you have is not the same amount from round to round because you have these different storyline cards that you reveal at the beginning of each round, and that storyline card determines who has priority or who has initiative. It determines how much money you have for that given turn, right? And any other special abilities that you might have just for that given round. But what's really cool is that players engage in this attack, and there's 3 different phases in which you can attack one another. You have basic combat or war, you have intrigue, and finally you have power. And all of these different areas give you different benefits. Ultimately, you're trying to get as much power as possible because the way you win the game, or one of the 2 ways you can win the game, is by having 15 power. Once you accumulate 15 power, you win the game. Another way you could win is by making your opponent run out through their deck. So you're attacking in all these different areas. So you're manipulating the situation and you have your different character cards that are helpful to you in either 1 or maybe even 2 of those different spheres or phases of combat. But no character is helpful to you in all 3. But that's fine because the ones that are helpful to you in 2 already are very valuable. And you're manipulating the situation and you're speculating, anticipating what your opponent's going to do because they can block your characters. But will they block your characters? If your characters go unblocked, then you score extra points, which is something that the other opponent has to consider. Lots of really cool, neat things in this game. If you like Game of Thrones as an intellectual property, this is probably a game you want to try out. My number 55 board game of all time, a Game of Thrones, the living card game. And now we move on to my number 54. And this game is also new to me this year. And it is Xenoshift Onslaught. And this is published by Cool Mini or Not, Come On Games. And this is a science fiction deck building game, cooperative tower defense game, where players are a group of special op forces in a futuristic time defending their base or their headquarters from being attacked by an onslaught, as the name indicates, of different aliens in the form of giant insects. And you have wave upon wave upon wave of these insects that are attacking your base. And each player controls their own respective lane, which they're defending, and they're deploying troops and they're adding equipment to those troops, armor and weapons and such. And they're trying to fight off these aliens. They're not even trying to defeat them. They're trying to survive them. Because the way the game plays is the game plays over the course of 9 rounds, theoretically, but you can lose if your tower or your base gets knocked, its health gets knocked all the way down to 0, the game is over. But if you survive all 9 rounds and your base has just 1 health, you have won the game. So that's all you're trying to do and figure out. It's really cool. I like the cooperative element of the game. For a deck builder, it has some neat features where you automatically get money added to your hand at the beginning of each turn, where every card that you acquire through your deck building immediately goes into your hand. Really cool features. Just trying to manipulate the whole situation. I haven't really done very well. I actually just recently started making it to the 9th round. I had a time there where I struggled even getting to the 7th round. But hard game to win, but a fun collaborative experience and a fun solo experience as well. My number 54 board game of all time, Xenoshift Onslaught. My number 53 board game of all time is also new to the list this year, and that is Star Trek Expeditions. And this is again designed by Reiner Knizia, the 4th one on this particular list, and it's published by WizKids Game. Well, first of all, this is a cooperative game with a popular intellectual property. I already talked about a game just like that a few games ago with Lord of the Rings, a Reiner Knizia cooperative board game design with a popular intellectual property. So once I knew that I liked Lord of the Rings and I heard about this game, I felt that there was a good chance I would like this game too. And it is a little bit ahead of Lord of the Rings. It is a much more modern design. Lord of the Rings was in the year 2000. This was in the year 2011. So Reiner Knizia, I feel like, made some adjustments to his game design as far as the cooperative play is concerned. I really like the collaboration in this game, which is a little bit more apparent and obvious than Lord of the Rings. Now, this game features a board which is basically the planet of Nibia that players are traveling and maneuvering through in order to explore, find different missions and objectives that they need to complete, acquire different artifacts that might be on the planet. And all the meanwhile, you have this orbit track on the top of the board where the Starship Enterprise will start somewhere in the middle here, and the Klingon battle cruiser will be here, and they'll be engaging in combat, right? And this will quite often push the Starship Enterprise backwards, but the Starship Enterprise is going to try to press forward because it's very important for them to stay on the positive side of this orbit track in order to actually win the game later on. And players are actually beaming back up and down from the ship and from the planet because there's certain actions that you cannot do. For example, healing. You need to go back to the Starship Enterprise, so you could go to sick bay and heal there. If you want to engage with the Klingon battle cruiser, you need to be on the Starship Enterprise as well. But most of the other actions are taking place here, where you're trying to, again, acquire those artifacts, discover those missions, and try to complete them, because there's basically 3 different missions. There's like an ecology mission, a rebel mission where you're trying to stop a rebellion, and a politics mission. And each of these missions are divided into 3 parts. And one by one, you're trying to discover where part 1 for each of the 3 missions are. You're trying to complete it, part 2, and then part 3. And basically the way you complete it is by acquiring certain types of stats in the current mission. The current mission might focus on your science stats, or it might focus on your command stats or your engineering stats. And each of the characters have a miniature which you're using, and it's a WizKids HeroClix miniature, and they have their stats in the 3 main types of categories that they're going to be trying to complete their missions in. And on top of this all, you're rolling some dice. So you're rolling the dice, you're adding the modifiers of the different stats, but there's further modifying that could go on because you're acquiring crew cards as the game progresses, and the crew cards go on your tableau and they add permanently to your stats. You also have some action cards that give you special one-time abilities and special benefits, one-off benefits. Really cool game. Again, players can help by being on the same space, which increases their chances of successfully completing a mission. They could also exchange crew cards and different artifacts if it benefits one player more than another. I like the thematic integration of this game. I've been following the Star Trek original series more in recent months. Lots of reasons why I like this game and why it's my number 53 board game of all time, Star Trek Expeditions. And now we move on to my number 52. And my number 52 is Pillars of the Earth. And this game is also new to me this year. This is designed by Michael Rieneck and Stefan Stadler and published by Cosmos Games. This game was out of print for many years when I first got into the hobby, so it was a grail game of mine. And when I finally saw that it was being reprinted, I was very much excited. Now, mind you, I had watched the actual drama series. I never read the novel that it's based on, Ken Follett's novel, but I did watch the drama series and I enjoyed it quite a lot. So I was very excited to play it, and I was able to connect with the game in ways that people who have not read the novels or have watched the drama series cannot do. This is a worker placement game, one of the original worker placement games, one of the OGs here. And what's really cool about it is you have this beautiful board painted and drawn by Michael Menzel, but it's such a functional and intuitive board because basically the worker placement actions, they get triggered in clockwise order. So you never have to be confused about what happens first and what happens next. You simply need to know the way a clock works and follow your way around, right? And it's so cool because you're gathering all these different resources, stone and sand and wood, and you're contributing them at the end of the round towards the building of the cathedral, right? The Pillars of the Earth Cathedral. And basically that's the way you're getting your victory points and your coins also, which money is a very important resource throughout the game. But what's really cool is the master builder phase of each round, where you're drawing the workers, your master builders, from a bag. And then you're placing them on this clockwise, or this little dial here that ranges from 7 through 1. And what's interesting is if you draw earlier on in the turn, that's advantageous because you get to go and pick your spot to your convenience. However, the earlier on you pick it, the more you have to pay in order to activate that worker. So you might just want to pass by and choose to be placed later on in the sequence and take your actions for free, or maybe hope that you draw your master builder later on in the round when the price is not too high. Maybe it's just 4, 3, or 2 even. Really cool, really fun game. Again, very beautiful and very nice intuitive gameplay. My number 52 board game of all time, Pillars of the Earth. Now we move on to my number 51 board game of all time, the last one for this list, and it is also new to the list this year, so there was lots of new games in this section right here. My number 51 is Eldritch Horror, designed by Corey Koneska and Nikki Valens, and published by Arkham Horror Games, by Fantasy Flight Games in their Arkham Horror File line of games. This game is a cooperative game within the Cthulhu mythos. Every player takes on the role of a different detective, and ultimately they're trying to fight the big bad, the ancient one, who's trying to break through the fabric of reality, trying to break through into our dimension, sending all his hordes of monsters and bad guys that we're trying to fight off. We're trying to close these portals. We're trying to acquire different weapons and different equipment and different resources that are going to help us do this. We're managing the travel of this game. This game has a map of the entire world. I am a big fan of board games that have maps as their boards, and if it's a global board, even more so. So you're traveling throughout the world, and there's different modes of transportation. You're traveling through train, you're traveling through ship, so even managing that is quite a challenge. And again, there's so much story text involved, because at the end of each round, you have an encounter phase, and you're flipping some cards, you're resolving some text, you're reading some storyline text, and you're doing some type of skill test. And there's 4 different attributes that each character has. So there is a lot of dice rolling. If you don't like dice rolling for resolution, then this probably is not the game for you. This is definitely very typical Ameritrash game. But if you like thematic and immersive experiences, challenging games, again, this game can be tough to beat. My number 51 board game of all time, Eldritch Horror. And that's it for today's videos, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Please consider clicking on one of these videos on the screen. If YouTube is showing them to you, it's because they think there's a good chance that you will like them. Also, check down in the description below and check the link to my Patreon account so you can consider being a patron and supporting this channel and becoming more involved with the process. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.